Today we're reviewing LG's UltraFine Evo 6K display. It's a 31.5 inch sized LCD screen with a super high 6K resolution. It's the world's first 6K Thunderbolt 5 display, and it's aimed at both Mac and Windows users who are looking for a super high resolution and pixel density on a large screen size. It's aimed at professional applications and color critical work, whether that's for photographers, video editors, 3D artists or designers, or indeed anyone whose focus is on image quality. The 6K resolution of 6144 by 3456 is clearly the headline spec of this new monitor, and it's a high enough resolution to produce a pixel density that meets Apple's definition of a Retina display on a panel like this. That being a screen with such a high pixel density that they say that the human eye cannot detect individual pixels at a normal viewing distance. We've recently reviewed a 27-inch size monitor from Philips with a 5K resolution that met the pixel density requirements for Retina display classification, and so with a larger screen size here of 31.5 inch, we need another increase in resolution to keep up. 6K is the resolution that Apple have also offered on their own Pro Display XDR as well, although their resolution is slightly less at 6016 by 3384, which produces a slightly lower pixel density, although both meet the definition of Retina display resolution still. Lots of people are looking for an alternative option to Apple's own display though, to offer more flexible connectivity, including for different devices and systems, and to overcome the typically closed Apple ecosystem, and of course to save some money compared with the steep price of Apple's screen. We'll provide some further comparisons and information a bit later on in terms of specs and features. There's loads of 4K resolution monitors of this size already, and anyone who's used one of those will appreciate the sharp and crisp picture already. But with the significant improvement in resolution here to 6K, we have a much higher pixel density of 224 ppi. There's 156% more pixels in fact than a 4K resolution panel, or 44% more pixels than 5K. As a result, the image looks even clearer and sharper than those already impressive offerings, and it avoids any pixelation even when you're inspecting it up very close. It offers a really impressive image quality and clarity that gives you razor-sharp text, UI elements and images, with potentially more desktop real estate to work with as well. For work and professional uses, it provides an incredibly detailed image. When connected to a Windows PC system, you'd need to use operating system scaling, otherwise everything is really tiny and uncomfortable. 250% scaling is what Windows seems to recommend by default for this physical panel resolution, but that will give you the equivalent desktop area of close to a 1440p resolution, just with a much higher pixel density for a much sharper and clearer image. That 250% feels a bit too much scaling though, and 200% and 175% are very usable, and that will give you a decent improvement then in desktop space and room. While 150% would look similar in text size to a 4K screen of this size if you were running that at a normal 100% scaling. That leaves you with text that is probably a little bit too small for most people. You do have flexibility here though to run at lower scaling factors if you want to anyway, but the 6K resolution is really all about offering a super high pixel density so that everything is just really sharp and crisp. The sweet spot, especially for macOS users, would be 200% scaling, as macOS natively handles scaling best when there's a direct integer multiplication of the resolution. So that will give you the equivalent logical resolution of a 3072 by 1728, and that's a good upgrade from 27-inch 5K displays, which would normally be run at the logical resolution of 2560 by 1440. At 200% scaling, the 6K resolution is scaled perfectly, and that helps ensure a really sharp image with amazing clarity while avoiding any kind of potential challenges or compromises. We don't use macOS ourselves, but some users have reported suboptimal performance at non-integer scaling, and while there are utilities that can help improve things with macOS scaling, the general view is that it's better to have a true integer scaling support if you can. A slightly different 6K resolution is what Apple have selected for their display of this size bracket, and so a lot of Mac users are looking for an alternative PC display option with a 6K resolution to pair with their Mac and other devices. In terms of usage scenarios, a 6K display is great for photographers who want to view and edit their images in amazing detail, and it can accommodate all 24 megapixel and lower resolution cameras with full width. It's also great for any kind of 3D modelling or design work which needs high levels of detail, or for graphic designers who might want a more expanded workspace, for instance. There's plenty of room for multitasking on a screen like this, and it's ideal for video editors and post-production professionals when they're working with 4K content too, as it allows you to view all of the content at its true native 4K resolution and still have a good amount of leftover screen space for UI interfaces, controls, icons and text areas. That could be important for 4K content creation and video production. Let's have a look at some of the other screen specs as well. The screen is built around an LG Display Nano IPS Black LCD panel that offers specs like a 2000:1 contrast ratio, 10-bit color depth support, and a wide color gamut covering 98% DCI-P3. It's 60Hz only, so do keep that in mind if you were for some reason thinking of gaming on this screen at all. Something higher like 120Hz would have been really welcome, even if it was just for a smoother and clearer desktop for work. But right now, LG Electronics are limited by the available panels being produced. While we're talking about gaming, we'll briefly talk about the response times here too. There are 4 modes offered by the screen, and the overall response times are, to be honest, pretty slow, showing noticeable smearing in moving content, and motion clarity is poor due to the low refresh rate. Even in the optimal fast mode, the response times were poor, although there wasn't really much overshoot at least. The highest faster mode pushed things just too far, and this resulted in noticeable overshoot and halos around moving objects. There's no adaptive sync support and no other gaming settings or modes given the target market for this screen, so with a low 60Hz refresh rate and poor response times, we'd say that this is a screen not really at all suited for gaming, apart from perhaps maybe the occasional very slow-paced strategy or simulator game perhaps. It's a screen designed for work and professional applications, and if you want a screen that's more capable of gaming and multimedia, you'd probably be better off considering a 4K resolution screen. Anyway, the IPS panel provides a very good overall image with wide viewing angles and a stable image, and although you get some IPS glow when you view dark content from an angle, it isn't too bad on this panel at all, which is good news for off-angle viewing positions. There's a standard matte anti-glare coating, which is the same as on other modern IPS panels, and what would be typically called light anti-glare. This does a good job of handling glare and reflections, and it's more suitable for brighter room conditions than a glossy screen coating would be, but on the other hand, some people will be disappointed that there's not a glossy coating option which can offer a clearer and cleaner and more impactful image in the right lighting conditions. If you're going to use the screen at a lower scaling level perhaps, and therefore view it from up very close, you may see some slight grain on the coating that wouldn't be visible if the panel was glossy, and that might be a shame when the resolution and pixel density is so high, and it's all about providing a super sharp and clear image. From a normal, typical viewing position, this isn't a problem though at all, we don't think. On the other hand as well, do keep in mind that a glossy screen coating is much less suited to a brighter room usage, and you do have to be more mindful of reflections and where your light sources are positioned. There's a massive range of connectivity options available here as well, including Thunderbolt 5, which can support DP alt mode, up to 80 gigabits per second of bandwidth, and 96 watts power delivery. Thanks to Thunderbolt 5, the screen can support twice the bandwidth of Thunderbolt 4 connections in fact. There's also a Thunderbolt 5 output connection for daisy chaining multiple displays. That might be useful to some people. Thunderbolt is the same physical connection as USB Type-C, and it supports USB-C devices just fine as well, so don't worry if your laptop or your other device only talks about having USB-C. LG have also added a DisplayPort 2.1 interface with UHBR 13.5 speed, enough to support the 6K resolution at 10-bit color depth and its 60Hz refresh rate without DSC being needed. That's assuming, of course, that you've got a compatible DP 2.1 graphics card. If you've only got a DP 1.4 graphics card, you can still power the full spec, but DSC will be used to support it. Everything is detected as one single display, and you only need one cable, unlike some of the very early super high resolution monitors that you might have seen in the past. There's also one HDMI 2.1 input and 2 USB Type-C data ports available. The only ports missing really here were normal USB-A data ports, which could have been handy, and a headphone connection, which seems to be a strange omission, especially when the screen offers some dual 5-watt integrated speakers. There's support for picture-in-picture and picture-by-picture for handling multiple video inputs, and the screen also features a KVM switch allowing you to control 2 systems from a single keyboard and mouse setup if you need. The design is sleek and professional with a 4-side borderless panel. There's a thin 1.5mm silver plastic edge and then an additional 9mm black panel border before the image starts around the sides. So it looks very nice and minimalist and would look very good in a multi-monitor setup, we think. There's a silver plastic rear enclosure with a uniform thickness across the screen, which looks very smart, and the stand attaches into the back with a quick release mechanism. The stand has a plastic rear section and a silver plastic front, which is pretty wide but still thin from a side-on view. The foot of the stand is a silver metal base, which is screwed onto the stand easily enough, and that provides a strong and stable base for the large screen, and there's only minor wobble as you move the screen around or use the menu. The stand offers tilt, height and rotate adjustments, which are all pretty smooth and easy to use, although height adjustment is quite limited due to the stand design. The stand can also be removed in favour of VESA 100 mounting if you prefer. There's no cable tidy hole in the back of the stand, but it is wide enough that the cables are easily hidden out of the way. The screen comes with white coloured cables and accessories and has a very large external power brick. There's also a small internal cooling fan in the screen, which you can hear if you press your ear up to the edges, but which never seem to get very loud at all during our actual usage, and unless you've got a fully silent system, it's unlikely to be audible, we think. The on-screen menu is controlled using a joystick toggle on the back of the screen, with quick and easy access to the menu and settings. You can also install the free LG Switch software to control the screen if you prefer, which includes features like screen split for aligning multiple windows easily, and a function to check and update the screen's firmware when needed. This software even supports a feature called M Control, which enables macOS native keyboard shortcuts for brightness and volume adjustment, which some users may find useful. We measured a good overall adjustment range with 587 nits maximum that should be more than adequate even in a bright room. There's a modest lower adjustment down to 57 nits, perhaps this could have been a little bit better for darker room usage. The backlight dimming is flicker free though, without needing to use PWM dimming, which is great news. There's also an ambient light sensor that's built into the top of the screen, which you can enable from the on-screen menu using the auto brightness setting. That will change the luminance automatically for you depending on your changing ambient light levels, and that could be handy for some users. The screen also retains a stable contrast ratio across the backlight adjustment range, measured at 1992:1 and basically meeting the advertised spec, which was strong for an IPS type LCD panel. That's thanks to the use of an IPS Black technology panel. We've also provided the luminance measurements for some of the other modes here as well, along with the shadow detail performance for dark grey shades near black. Overall, the shadow detail was reasonable, although this near black detail is improved a little bit with proper calibration as well. There is a black equalizer setting available in the game section of the on-screen menu, which can tweak darker shade detail a bit. Bumping this up from a default of 50 to a level of 60 helps improve things a bit, but any higher than that and you start to get raised blacks as well, so we'd not recommend going any higher than 60. There's no low blue light modes on this screen, although it is TUV Rhineland certified for low blue light emission at a hardware level. There is a reader preset mode available, which offers a warmer, more yellow appearance, but has its colour settings all locked in the menu. Luminance uniformity was good overall, although the edges of the screen were a little darker than the middle area, dropping by around 20% maximum along the right hand edge on our sample. We didn't see any issues with colour variation or tinting across the panel on our sample, even when viewing full white backgrounds, although the edges of the screen do appear a little darker in those situations. It's not likely to be a problem during normal usage, we don't think, and panel uniformity could of course vary by sample. By default, the screen is set in its custom preset mode, which operates with the full native colour space of the panel. Gamma was mostly very good, except for an odd spike near white where lighter grey shades get crushed a bit. The RGB balance and colour temperature were excellent across the grayscale, and we had a strong grayscale accuracy as a result. The native colour space of the panel extends a long way beyond the sRGB reference space in red and green shades especially, and causes large oversaturation of SDR content, as is normal for wide gamut screens. That leads to poor default colour accuracy for sRGB colours, but that's normal, and we'll explore ways to improve this in a moment. There's very good absolute coverage of the DCI P3 and Adobe RGB colour spaces, although there's still around 11 to 19% over coverage natively. So even these wide gamut colours are only moderately accurate out of the box. Again, that's to be expected with such a wide colour gamut active, and there's ways to clamp more accurately to those reference colour spaces as well. There are 3 emulation modes provided in the on-screen menu. sRGB mode isn't quite as accurate for color temp and grayscale as the native mode, but it is still good overall, just a little bit too warm. Importantly, this mode clamps the native color space back close to the sRGB reference, actually going a little bit too far and leaving us with some small undercoverage, but with the smaller color space now active, the accuracy of sRGB colors was good. In the menu, you still have access to adjust the brightness, contrast and color settings as well if you want. The Adobe RGB mode was very similar in gamma and grayscale, but this mode clamps the color space back very close to the Adobe RGB reference now, a reference space commonly used in the photography sector. Again, the clamping was a little bit too aggressive and left us with some small undercoverage, but Adobe RGB color accuracy was good. DCI-P3 mode was a similar story in terms of grayscale and color temp, but this mode is actually configured to a 2.6 gamma, the target used for the DCI-P3 theatre standard. Anyway, this mode provides closer clamping of the color space and good accuracy for DCI-P3 colors, commonly used for HDR content creation and consumption. Higher levels of accuracy can be obtained if you have your own calibration device and software. We profiled the screen in the native custom mode and achieved a very accurate 2.2 gamma, D65 white point and clamping back to the sRGB color space. Our calibrated ICC profile and full best settings guide for this screen are linked in the description below if you want to try them out, and that profile can then be used in color-aware applications to work with the sRGB content nice and accurately. For more advanced configuration and control, the screen also supports hardware-level calibration, allowing you to define whatever targets you want to work with and save that calibration to the monitor's internal lookup table. There are two modes that you can hardware calibrate if you want. So for instance, you could maybe set one up to the DCI-P3 display standard, which you could use to configure to 2.2 gamma, D65 white point and the DCI-P3 color space. Maybe you could do another mode for the sRGB color space with an sRGB gamma, for instance. That will give you alternative modes that you configure for the content that you want to work with. The free LG Calibration Studio software allows you to set your color space, gamma, color temp and luminance quickly and easily, and then the process is largely automated from there. It's great to see hardware calibration supported on a professional monitor like this, although we'd also like to see support for third-party software like Portrait Display's Kalman software, for instance, as the capabilities and options in LG's own software are fairly limited. There's also no support to calibrate HDR mode at the moment. Speaking of HDR, the screen offers some low to mid-tier LCD HDR capabilities with VESA Display HDR 600 certification, which means some basic edge-lit local dimming, a peak brightness of 600 nits or more, and a wide colour gamut that covers over 90% of the DCI-P3 reference space. With only basic edge-lit local dimming available, you can't expect much in the way of contrast improvements across the screen, to be honest, and so the HDR hardware capabilities are pretty limited. If you're working with a lot of HDR content, then you might want to consider a different mini LED backlit or an OLED screen perhaps. When HDR is enabled, there are 4 preset modes to choose from in the menu. The default custom mode is the one that's been certified under the VESA Display HDR scheme according to the menu, and you have access there to adjust the brightness level and color temperature setting if you want to. That's useful if you want to customize or tweak things yourself. The other key setting that's enabled in the menu now is the Deep Black Pro option, which is the setting that activates the backlight local dimming, and it's got settings for off, low, medium and high. The main things that change as you adjust this setting are the EOTF tracking and the contrast. With local dimming turned off, you get pretty obviously raised blacks for some reason in HDR mode, which is a real problem, and blacks start to look dark grey instead. Shadow detail was poor as well in this configuration, with the first visible grey shade being RGB 9. Blacks were actually still a bit raised in the low and the middle modes too, and only really resolved in the maximum high mode. That definitely seems to be the optimal setting as a result. Shadow detail was then improved to RGB 5, and there was some minor over-brightening of mid to light grey shades. There's also then some roll-off for lighter shades to help preserve tonal values. The local dimming setting also has an impact on luminance and the potential contrast ratio of the panel, with the high mode offering the highest peak brightness as well as the highest contrast ratio, avoiding the raised blacks that we just discussed as well, which were caused by the poor near black EOTF tracking in the other modes. Keep in mind though that with the low number of local dimming zones, the contrast ratio improvements are likely to be a lot less in real-world content because of the screen's inability to control small areas of the image properly. You can see large areas of the screens light up and dim during test scenarios, as well as some flashing artifacts, but in real-world HDR content, the changes in image and contrast are normally less drastic. Those changes are less notable, but the actual dynamic range improvements and contrast enhancements are very limited. Peak white luminance reached up to 960 nits maximum, a considerable way beyond the 600 nits required for HDR 600 certification in fact. It's toned down a bit to 659 nits for the smallest screen highlights due to the low number of local dimming zones. That helps reduce halos and large areas of overbrightening around small objects. The RGB balance was a bit weighted towards blue by default, which resulted in a slightly bluish and cool grayscale, especially in lighter grey shades and for white. The mid to light grey shades are a bit brighter than intended due to the EOTF tracking, which causes some loss of detail. You can actually easily improve the grayscale and colour temp with a simple switch to the manual warm 1 mode in the menu, which improves that quite nicely as you can see here. Colour gamut was wide with approximately 80% coverage of the Rec 2020 colour space used for HDR content, and colour accuracy was good overall. This custom mode seems to be the optimal HDR mode, with the vivid mode being very over-brightened and having poor EOTF tracking, a very cool and bluish grayscale and very poor colour accuracy as a result. The cinema preset mode is overall very similar to the custom mode, except that it's darker than intended near black, which severely crushes shadow detail. We'd recommend sticking with the custom mode with that VESA Display HDR certification. There's a few other 6K resolution monitors available, but the most popular alternatives to this model that have been released so far seem to be the Dell U3224KB-A from a couple of years ago, and of course Apple's Pro Display XDR. While the Apple display is undoubtedly a beautiful screen, it's pretty much designed for Mac only and has very limited support for Windows PC systems, with even basic things like brightness setting adjustments needing a Mac to change it. There's no on-screen menu or controls on that model. It does have much higher end hardware capabilities for HDR content with a 576 zone mini LED backlight, which makes it more well suited to viewing and working with HDR, but other features and connectivity are pretty limited on their screen. It also has an impressive screen coating with either a standard glass front or their nano textured glass coating option, so you do have the option for a glossy finish there if you prefer it. There's Thunderbolt 3 connectivity with 96 watts power delivery, but a lower 40 gigabits per second bandwidth, as well as 3 USB data ports. But apart from that, there's no other video inputs for other devices or outputs for daisy chaining support, so you can't even connect a second system or device to it, which does make it very restrictive. There's no KVM switch, no picture-in-picture and picture-by-picture support, no integrated speakers, and even the stand and VESA mount are an added extra. The new LG screen is aimed at both Windows and Mac users, and while it does have lower end HDR capabilities and is not as well suited to HDR content as a result, its feature set and connections are far better, and best of all, the stand is included in the price. The design of the screen and the stand is perhaps not so coincidentally quite similar to Apple's display, although Apple's screen does use more premium materials with an aluminium enclosure and a magnetic stand attachment for instance. Pricing wise, by the time that you've added on the ridiculously priced stand for Apple's screen, it ends up being basically 3 times the cost of LG's model, which is going to be a tough sell for anyone. Dell's ultra-sharp U3224KB-A uses the same IPS black panel and coating finish as the LG screen, and offers a more similar spec and feature set to this model. It's also more suited to both Mac and Windows users as a result, with standard features like an on-screen menu and multiple video connections being available. Its connection options include DisplayPort, HDMI, a Thunderbolt input and a Thunderbolt output for daisy chaining, as well as 2 USB data ports like on the LG. It also has 5 USB-A ports that the LG is lacking and an RJ45 Ethernet connection too, but it does have a lower speed Thunderbolt 4 connection instead of the Thunderbolt 5 connection, which has 40 gigabits per second of bandwidth instead of 80 gigabits per second of bandwidth that the LG offers. But on the other hand, it does offer a higher 140 watts power delivery instead of 96 watts. The Dell screen also features an integrated webcam and mic on the top to go along with its more powerful integrated speakers. But the webcam section gives the screen a chunkier and less premium design, we think, and it doesn't look as sleek and attractive as the LG model. Dell's screen is listed on their product page at $1,000 more than the LG model, although it can be found for less in some retailers. That makes it at least a little bit more of a reasonable price comparison than Apple's display. The LG UltraFine Evo 6K is a very interesting option if you're looking for a super high resolution screen with an extensive feature set and impressive connectivity for professional applications. 6K looks incredibly sharp and detailed and will be especially important for macOS users for Retina resolution support. It provides an excellent picture quality and a really amazing image. This screen is available to order now at a price of $2,000 at the time of this video, but you can check latest pricing and availability using our affiliate link in the description below. If you own the screen and you're looking for all of our best setting recommendations for SDR, HDR and other areas, we'll link to our Patreon post below where you can find all of those. If you found this video useful, please give us a quick like below and hit subscribe if you want to stay up to date on all of our future monitor news and reviews and content. Thank you for watching. We'll catch you next time.